Welcome to another exciting episode of Rogue Finances and Life, where we are life and financially sound. For today's episode, I have Mr. Persichitte, which he is a financially planner. He is a certified financial planner. He is a certified public accountant and a certified fraud examiner. He has degrees in accounting, economics, data science, and he's currently teaching accounting and finances concepts in the Metropolitan State University of Denver. So without any further ado, here is Mr. Persichitte.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really happy to be talking about a concept that is very important to me and something that I've spent a lot of time kind of researching, going through, understanding how it works, and really getting beyond the marketing buzz terms. And the term that I like to use is ethical investing. Ethical investing. The reason that I like using that term, as opposed to any of those other buzzwords or some of the newer buzzwords, is because it really speaks to what we're trying to do. It speaks to what the goal is and how we want to get there. What the goal is and how we want to get there. And so today I'm going to talk about it in a couple of different ways. I'm going to talk about the when, what, why, and how of ethical investing, when it started, what the changes that happened over that time, what it is, why an investor might choose it, and then the nuts and bolts of where it's coming from. How do you actually execute this in your plan? So ethical investing has changed over the years. And like I said, there's a lot of different buzzwords for it. You might have heard ESG as the newer one. That's the one that's really common: environment, social governance. You've also might have heard SRI, or socially responsible investing, impact investing, green investing. And I'm starting to see some popping up where they say thematic investing, where there's different themes that you're investing in, or there are different pieces that you're moving towards. The concept is anything but new. It's been around for a very long time, and it really does have its foundations in religion. And the Jewish sacred texts have specifics of what is allowed, what is not allowed. That moves on. We see in Islam, there's also guidelines for how people can ethically invest. Moving way forward in time, the Methodist Church in the United States gave guidelines for its institutions that it's helping to oversee, so how the church is going to invest. And they applied that also, extended it to the parishioners to say, hey, these are some guidelines of how you can invest without hurting people, without being a evil corporation. More recently, we got some guidance from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, the USCCB, and what they're adopting, what they're talking about, is something called an exclusionary philosophy. Basically, what they say is it's okay to invest. Ethically, morally, it's okay to invest as long as you're not investing in evil companies. Do not invest in sinful companies. Invest in businesses that we can agree we use and help make a contribution in the world. That's where it gets a little bit sticky, because everybody has a different definition there. They have a different definition. With people flowing in to ethical investing, we saw a really huge boom over the last 3 years. And this is clearly something that, whether it's because they are charged with it by the church, whether they came to it on their own, whether it's some feeling that they have of, I need to do the right thing, people are really moving towards this. A lot of companies are responding by creating their own funds to appeal to these people, the people that are moving into it. So everybody has kind of a problem here where there's these issues in what the definitions are. What does this even mean? The AICPA is currently working with the SEC to try to push new disclosures, new rules for companies that have to disclose things. And where they're really focused right now is on the environmental side of things. The reason that they really care about this is there's been a lot of companies that have engaged in something called astroturfing or greenwashing, where they are claiming to be an environmentally friendly company, but they're not really doing anything differently. They're still polluting as much as their peers, but they are selling this message. We're better than everybody else. We're doing things better. We're doing things in a more sustainable way. So how do we deal with this? The easiest way to deal with it is with concrete data, measurable information. As I just mentioned, I'm a data guy. I went to school for data. I like decisions that are measurable, that are objective, that are based on facts. So one of the providers out there, Fidelity, there's a lot of different providers, has this map. And they have this map of where do these companies get their money. And what you can see here is a big spread about the different categories that they're measuring. Some of them are positive categories. Some are categories like, are they using sustainable methods? Are they investing in green energy? Are they promoting social accountability in the world? On the other side, you have some of the things that we want to exclude. Just running down the list really quick here, we have tobacco, alcohol, cannabis, genetically modified products, firearms, weapons or controversial weapons. These are things like military manufacturers, gambling, pornography, animal abuse, and then they break it down into specifically Christian values based on that USCCB criteria, Islam values, and finally they have a category for equality. There's a few other categories that they're in the process of adding, which is industries that are very destructive on their face. So certain types of oil extraction and the use of palm oil. Now, is that to say that every palm oil company is a bad company? No, not really. It's just much easier to measure. Are they participating in this industry that is slashing and burning forests, right? So as I was mentioning that list, depending on your personal beliefs and your personal values, some of those things might have got you going and saying, hey, this is problematic. I don't want this. I don't want this in my portfolio. Whereas some of those things might be, well, I don't really care as much about this. Maybe I don't feel that alcohol companies are necessarily bad. I don't feel that companies who are experimenting with GMOs are bad. And it really comes down to you individually. And I like to take it back to my ethics and my values and what I personally value, and really trying to answer a question that was first posed to me in college. I went to a Christian school. They posed the question, how ought we to live? How ought we to live? In other words, what are we supposed to do with our lives, with our time here? It's a really important question that everybody needs to answer. And the way I feel about investments is you have to answer that question for yourself, for your personal life, before you can answer that question for your investments. You have to think about what is important to me and what do I care about. Now, in terms of those values, we can all feel this with our very divided political system. Whatever side you're on for things, a lot of people feel very strongly on different sides of different issues. And so when we're talking about the social aspect of an investment, that might mean different things to different investors. And I'll tell you, the easiest example for this is there's a group of people who believe in marriage equality, in freedom of marriage, and in getting the government out. And there's folks who want to defend traditional family values, right? Both people have these strongly held beliefs. Both people have very strongly held beliefs, but those beliefs are in direct opposition to each other. Those beliefs cannot both be true from a philosophical standpoint. You either believe in one or the other, or you're somewhere in the middle. But you don't feel strongly in both ways because they are fundamentally opposed. Again, if it applies to your life, it can apply to your investments. And going to that definition of socially responsible, we have the same questions that come up, and different fund managers are going to have differences of opinion. So how do we deal with this? How do we deal with it going forward? One thing that I like to do with clients is work through it and say, what do you care about? What is important in your viewpoint? And what are some of the issues that you feel very strongly about? I am willing to share, for me personally, I do really care about human rights. That's at the top of my list. And going along with that, you also want to reduce companies that are directly harmful for people. So weapons manufacturers, cannabis, tobacco, I feel like those products can be harmful to some populations. Now, some people completely disagree with me. They think it's fine. They don't think it's a big deal. That's why it's so important to really define this before you set something into motion. The way that I handle this, and I think the way that is easiest to handle this, is through the exclusionary approach. That is removing companies that you find are offensive or evil. One of the ways that is useful, is easier to implement, is if someone also excluded something that I was neutral about, for example, alcohol companies. I don't have strong opinions on that. If somebody removed that from the portfolio, that doesn't necessarily hurt me. That doesn't necessarily take away. On the other side, the proactive side, where you have people actively looking at certain views, trying to make a change in the world, they can be more impactful, but you have to make sure you're on the same page. You have to make sure you're on the same page there. All right. Skipping ahead a little bit here, I want to talk a little bit about some of the potential benefits of investing in ethical companies. The ethical companies that the folks that I work with dimensional funds. The types of companies that they're screening out are those with the highest levels of risk. This goes back to my time as an auditor, my time that fraud examiner hat. I want to reduce risk. I want to reduce risk overall, and I want to have risks that are appropriate for the goals. There's a lot of new research coming out, and a lot of it suggests that investing in ethical companies lowers your risk overall. And we can kind of take this back. I take it back to a Bible verse of those who cannot be trusted in small things cannot be trusted in large things. And where that really resonates with me is that the companies that are doing things that you think are not okay, they're doing that to their customers. There's probably not a line to say, I'm not going to harm my shareholders. There's not going to be some arbitrary stopping point that goes along to get people out of there. We look into other research like the fraud data and show that in 22% of financial statement fraud cases, so cases where somebody lied about their business to get money from investors, right? In 22% of those cases, the primary risk factor, the number one thing that they were considering, was poor tone at the top, meaning the people who run that company are unethical. The people who run that company are not doing things ethically. So again, why would we imagine that that line is going to be there for us as investors when it's not there for the customers, for the employees? There's nothing special about our relationship that they're going to suddenly turn around and revise their life. I'm going to pause there. Because I think that gives us a really good base to talk about ethical investing, what it means, how it's impacting people. So did you have anything you wanted to add there?
Well, the other thing, like I said, I believe that it's very important to think on investing with an ethically mindset, because we have to think that, because when we investing in something, that means that we are supporting that business. And if that business is not acting ethically, then why are we supporting a business that is out there hurting either people or the environment or anything, when we know that we shouldn't, especially knowing that, that's not how, we should be. Like, especially like I was saying earlier, if there are insurance companies out there that the only thing that they want to do is gain a profit and benefit from the ignorance of people not understanding how certain life insurance or certain products, how it works. So even though it might be legal to do, but if it's not ethically to do, then why do it? That's why we believe in putting our potential clients first, and not so much the profit.
And you really said it, of it's coming down to support. And when your money is going to something, you're enabling that to happen. And another one that is important to me personally is controversial weapons. So companies that manufacture like landmines or claymore bombs, right? Weapons that indiscriminately kill, even in a war, weapons that cause civilian casualties, that hurt innocent people. If I give them $100 with the expectation of getting back more, right? That's finance theory. I'm giving you money in exchange for money in the future. If I'm giving them $100, what are they doing with it? They're taking that $100 and they're going to use it to make mines, to make claymores, to make weapons that indiscriminately kill. And I enabled that. That, in my opinion, needs to fall on my conscience. I in essence told them to do this. I said, please take my money and use my money to hurt people if I'm not investing ethically.
And even though this it's just a movie, it comes to mind, but when you really think about it, when they first came out with the very first Iron Man movie, what triggered Tony Stark, the character, to stop selling weapons was that he seen the destruction that it caused, to the point where he almost lost his life, for him to think, wait a minute, I'm earning a living by destroying other people's lives. So he totally made the decision to stop developing weapons and everything. He decided to create something that he can save lives.
And I think one of the pieces that you mentioned there that's so important is, if we don't see it, it's not as impactful. If you see it, if you know what's happening, what that dollar is going towards, you'd care a lot more. And that's one of the downsides of our current financial world of if you're throwing money into something like an index fund and not paying attention to where it's going, you might be funding a weapons company without even thinking about it.
Exactly.
You might be funding something that hurts people without even thinking about it. And it's a joke my friends made all the time of it's a victimless crime, just like punching a guy in the dark. If you don't see it, is there's still harm done.
Exactly.
Of
You're
course,
right
the
about
answer
that.
is yeah, absolutely. So kind of switching back a little bit to the nuts and bolts of things, of what are the different ways to view this and what are the different ways to implement it in your life? This is an emerging topic. This is something that is fairly new. So we're seeing different definitions. Again, things mean different things to different people. As I mentioned before, my personal favorite is the exclusionary approach that says, let's just invest in companies that are fine. Let's invest in companies that aren't actively hurting anybody. And most of the companies that I think of that I interact with on a day-to-day basis are just fairly neutral. Like my phone company, right? I don't really need my phone company to save the world. I need them to give me reliable phone service. But I don't want them to hurt anybody to do that, right? So there's kind of this big bar in the middle of companies that are neither good nor bad. They just kind of are, and we interact with them all the time. And as long as they're not hurting anybody, they're fine, right? The exclusionary approach allows for that type of investment. You take that one step further and you have the inclusionary approach, which means I'm only going to invest in companies that are actively trying to make the world better. A really good example of this is in the energy sector. So there's a lot of green energy funds to say, I'm going to give my money to a company who is trying to solve climate change, a company who's trying to reduce carbon emissions. I'm going to give my money to them because I want them to succeed because they are a proponent of something that I care about. Where I get a little, nervous about this one is, again, back to the companies. Most companies are not good or bad. They're just kind of going about their day. And we see in the news a lot of the ones that are on the extreme ends, the companies that are doing lots of good stuff or lots of bad stuff. But the companies that we interact with most of the time, we don't even think about them. So I had a prepackaged meal today. It was pretty good. It saved me from having to go to a restaurant, saved me a little bit of money. I don't think they're good or evil. I guess that, they created a little bit of food waste because I had it individually packaged there. But they're not really doing anything. If you think about the money that you're spending on a week, just the average person spends on a week, most of it's going to go to those companies that are just there, just kind of neutral. The other one, and really the most extreme, is the activist investor. The activist investor has had some really amazing stories over the past 10 years. And, one of the examples here would be PETA. So folks who care about the treatment of animals, buying stocks in a cosmetic company that tests on animals, right? So they're buying shares in a company they think is evil. Why are they doing that? They're doing that so they have a voice in the conversation, and they can go to those board meetings and vote and say, stop doing this. Stop experimenting on animals. It's very important to us, and we own the company. That's a very, very expensive way to make your voice be heard. And I think your average investor may or may not want to put that much money at stake to be able to have a voice there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So again, back to where I sit personally. And just to give you a little bit of an idea, I exclude pornography, gambling, coal, large polluters, companies that provide abortions or manufacture abortive agents, stem cell research, child labor, oppressive governments, tobacco, cannabis, firearms, nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, and landmines. Again, some people are going to look at that list and say, oh, wait a minute, there's something on there that I think is neutral. There's something on there that I think is maybe good for the world. Maybe you think that one of these things should exist. And again, it all comes back to just finding something that is going to fit, finding something that is going to match your own personal values, which is in this day and age getting harder and harder to do, just because there's so many different opinions, and a lot of times those opinions are in direct contrast with each other.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I don't know, what do you think about the nuts and bolts there?
Oh, I loved it. Yeah, really, very informational. It makes sense. Yeah, I definitely know the listeners are gonna really get something out of this and make them think different, especially like those that are thinking about investment. Like I know a lot of people that are just starting to invest and starting to look at investments. So this will be something very useful.
Yeah, well, that's great. I think as you're kind of growing and expanding there's so much noise, and for so many people, I think this is a punchline. I think ethical investing, ESG, it feels like a punchline. It feels like a gimmick to get people in. Whereas if you do it and you do it right, it's actually a lot of work. And it's a lot of getting to know people and understanding what is important to those people.
Exactly. You are exactly right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for being available. I really enjoyed this episode. This is one of my best episodes. I know the listeners are really going to get something out of it. And I really appreciate your time and for being available.
Well, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I love being a guest on the show. And I really hope that we can help some people and we can make companies do the right thing.
Oh yeah, I believe so. If it's not just if it's just one person at a time.
Yeah, sometimes that's all that it takes. Is you do what you can in a given day. You're not going to change the world in a day.
Exactly.
Right.